ladies and gentlemen, it is TD Fishing here, and today I'm going to be teaching the very long-awaited flathead rig that I've been using for over a decade now. I've had a lot of you request it, and today is the day I'm actually going to do it. So I'm actually at Lake Havasu right now, and the water is very clear. So I've been wanting to do this rig video, but do it like super legit. I'm actually gonna swim underwater, like cast my rig out and then swim underwater with the GoPro and then just show you what the rig is doing underwater. So that's basically one of the reasons why I've taken so long, is I need very clear water and just doing it essentially. I need warm enough water to swim. It's still like early May right now, so the water's pretty cold, but I should be good to go. So this is actually one of my favorite flathead setups. I have a Penn Squall 40. I'm left-handed, I use the left hand, and I love lever drags. I apologize if it's windy. I have my drop shades down trying to help it a little bit. It's like 16, 17 mile an hour winds out there. I'm in this little cove right now hanging out during the day. So the line I'm using it's Cast King, and it's the old 8-strand 120-pound test. There's going to be some of you for sure that are going to say it's way overkill, it's stupid, not needed, which I fully agree with you. It is not needed for the fish, but some of the structure that I fish is stupid. I like to fish giant forests underwater, giant rock piles that will cut your line super fast. I used to use pretty light line. I went a long time of just using 40-pound mono, then 50, then 60, and I just kept fishing heavier structure and getting bigger and bigger fish that would break that line. And now I basically just don't want that to ever happen again. There's a lot of people that use heavier than 120. I use 120 to 150 now. This specific one is 120. I've been using it for a very long time and it works amazing. Flatheads are not line sensitive, so there's no real reason to go light. I've been going lighter a little bit on the rod and reel. This is obviously a heavier setup, but the one thing you can't skimp out on is the line, just because you never know if you're gonna hook a fish and it's gonna take you right into rock pile and you're never gonna see that fish again, and who knows how big that fish was. You can't not do it if you're gonna take flathead fishing serious. If you're just, you know, weekend warrior going out a couple times a year or whatever, you're using 65-pound braid, 80-pound braid, something like that, you're probably fine 80% of the time, but you never know when you're gonna hook into a fish that will ruin your day, ruin your night. I've lost some very good fish because I wasn't using the proper gear, and that's always a heartbreak. So not anymore. All right, so I got the reel and I got the line. This rod, so it's a Cedros, it's an Akuma Cedros speed jig. So this rod, and almost all of my flathead rods, are all jigging rods, like saltwater jigging rods. They're super lightweight, but they are very strong. So this setup is actually very light. I used to use super heavy gear. I even still have an old Sea Lion. That thing is a broomstick, and it still works for sure, but it's just a little bit heavy. It's a little overkill. This particular rod is a medium heavy, so the line rating is 50 to 100 pound braid. Obviously I'm using a little heavier than that, but this will catch any flathead in the world. I'll put a couple clips in right now. This rod keeled over on some 40+ pound fish. Alright guys, our fish on. Pulling through some trees. So that's the setup. I don't know who actually invented this rig. There's a lot of people that have been doing it now. I'm sure they've come up with rig names and stuff, but I've been using this for a long time, well before it was really a name, and I didn't invent it either. I got it from, more or less got it from a guy named Skunko and Ryan, Creature Reaper. So shout out to them for kind of doing the brainchild of this, and over the years I've developed little things, certain changes here and there just to fine tune it. So what I call this rig in general is a suspended bobber rig. So some people call it a helicopter rig. There's a couple different names for it out now. So essentially what it is, I'll put up a photo of my rig, essentially a little Photoshop picture that I made that shows it all. Essentially what it is it starts out as a sliding bobber rig, which is what I use for bluegill and what tons of people use. So you have a bobber stop, a bead, a bobber, and then a swivel. But instead of a regular barrel swivel, like a 1-to-1, I like to use tri-swivels. So just like this guy, there's 3 points on it. So the whole idea of this rig is you want your bait to be off of the bottom. That is the most important thing. That is the one major downside to just a regular Carolina rig, is when you cast that line out, your lead hits the bottom and your bait is on the bottom. So if you're fishing near rocks and stuff, your bait can literally just hide in rocks and not be seen. Your flathead or whatever you're fishing for is gonna have to like dig through rocks and stuff to try to find your bait. If you're fishing on like a super flat sandy beach or something, you're probably okay with just a regular Carolina. Obviously it's worked for eons. I've caught tons and tons of fish doing that. You'll get more snags too with the Carolina rig if you're hitting rocks and stuff. The biggest thing is the bait not being visible. You want your bait visible at all times. The whole idea is your bait is not touching the bottom. It's always trying to fight to get down, but the bobber is keeping it up. And what's keeping the whole rig in place is the lead. So that's what the great benefit of this rig is having lead that keeps your whole rig in one place for the most part. If you have a big carp on, it's going to drag it around. But this is 8 ounces of lead. Basically why kind of helicopter rig is your bait's constantly trying to swim and it's just going to go in circles trying to find the bottom, and then this bobber pushes it right back up. So it's a great way to keep your bait visible all night long. It's always going to be visible pretty much. I use a fairly long lead leader now. I used to not do too long, but I've been doing like 4 and 5 foot leaders most of the time, and then probably like a 12 to 18 inch hook leader. Let's go into actually rigging this right now. So most people know what these are. Right here, you got your bobber stop. So basically you put your line through this little black tube, and then you pull the strings off of the line, and then you have a bobber stop and you cinch it down. And what that does is the bobber won't be able to go past that point. So that's what sets the depth of your bobber essentially. Like I said, I use heavier line and this doesn't quite cut it. It can work and I have used it in the past, but I literally just, usually I'll take, you know, a 10-12 inch section of this and I cut it. And with that, I will actually tie my own bobber stop. Okay, so there's basically the finished product right there. So you got just loops, and with the flathead setup, I do kind of like to leave this tag in pretty long because there's definitely sometimes you're going to want to like re-tighten it. Next is just a regular bead. You'll need a fairly large bead. So I'm using one of these bigger pink ones right here, so you can see that the hole is fairly large. And I'm just gonna put my line through that if I can, just like that. Okay, and you can see this bead will not go over that knot at all, and that's what you want. This is a pretty crusty one. I use these Billy Boy bobbers a lot. I'll show you a newer one. That's a newer one. This guy's good. I don't know the size. I know I just get it from Bass Pro forever ago, and these are the larger ones. There's a smaller one that works fine. I'm sure it'll work great for bluegill and stuff, but I switch from bluegill to carp all the time, so I like those bigger floats. Put on the old crusty boy, the tried and true. And same thing, there's a hole in there, and you just run your line through it. Now you have your bobber, the pink bead, and the bobber stop. This is definitely not necessary, but I've been using these little rubber bumpers. So there's a bigger hole in that side and a smaller hole in that side. And what this is for me anyway is it acts as a bead, but it also protects the knot. So now we'll go on to the swivel. I have two separate swivels that I've been using for these flatheads. That's another one I use, so it's kind of the same thing. The bottom of the T is always going to be the hook leader, and I mean, obviously that would be the T, so that's bottom, because you want the straight through on both. It's always a little bit offset. They're never like actually equal, so you can tell that's top T, this is your hook leader, and the rig itself is going to be like that. So same thing with this one. This one works great, and you can tell these are big swivels. I use heavy line, and they need to withstand my rig. I don't really remember the actual size, but it's always smart to go big. Flatheads are not line sensitive. Doesn't matter if you're using a giant swivel. It's better to go bigger than to go smaller, for sure, every time. This knot that I'm going to attach to this is going to be Palomar knot. There's a million tutorials on the Palomar knot for sure. So Palomar knot, especially with this braid setup, is a fantastic knot. You don't need to cut like super close to the line, just in case there is a little bit of movement. So you can see I left a little bit there. So I use 120 pound main line, and I've been using this 150 pound test Bull Buster mono leader. This is the, again, people are gonna say it's way overkill, which it sort of is, but I've broken fish on 80 pound test, and I've broken one fish on 100 pound test. That was probably the biggest fish I've ever had on in my life, and I'll show you the clip of that right here.
Got a really good run. Oh my god, no. Dude, that was such a good fish too. Oh my god, dude. The 100 pound test. We've never done that with 100 pound test, ever.
So yeah, I don't want that to ever happen again. So I now use 150 pound test, and this specific line, it's fairly thin for how strong it is. So it's 1.2 millimeters. A lot of even the 100 pound test is around there. So I get 50 pound test more with the same kind of thickness of the line. Next is the hook. This specifically is a Gamakatsu Octopus J, and it's an 8/0. This hook will act as a circle hook if you want it to. It will hook a fish by itself if you're tight lining. If you just want to reel it up on a fish and kind of like swing set the hook, you don't have to wail on it. This still does it all the time. I catch so many fish on a J hook using it as what a traditional circle hook would do, which is tight lining. But the difference is I can set hook when I need to, and I will catch fish doing that all the time. I literally did it last night. I had multiple fish, you know, they'll smack my line and then they'll come straight in at the boat, and I gotta reel and set hook as fast as I can. And if I'm using a circle, that doesn't always work. If I'm suspending straight under the boat with a bluegill or carp, I will use a Carolina rig, just because you can obviously make sure that the bait's not touching the bottom. Yeah, so J hooks, highly recommend them, especially these Octopus Gamakatsu J hooks. These will work all the time. I've been using these for forever. My very first flatheads ever, when I was a little baby, were on these little hooks, and I've never switched. These hooks have always worked. I've never had to change. Don't fix what ain't broke. All right, let's go into the knot. This hook needs a Snell knot. So you'll have a snell knot and it runs straight through that eyelet and it doesn't really change. It's just a straight pull. If I was going to do like a Palomar or something like that, it would actually float backward, like tilted back, kind of like that. When I do a snell knot, it goes along with the shank. And now you can see that it's nice and wrapped, super clean. This is a proper snell knot, very tight woven, very clean, and you won't have any issues of this coming off. That's the finished hook right there. You want enough length to tie your knot still and have like a fairly decent length. So I'm gonna do around there. That's probably maybe just shy of 2 feet or so. Going back to my swivel, here's the bottom of the T. That's the one you're gonna wanna do for the hook. This knot is fairly difficult, I will say, with this heavy line, no matter what knot you do. Most people do Palomar. I do that occasionally. A lot of times I will just do a straight clench knot. Like not even an improved clench, just a clench knot. Now I got my hook leader on there and I'm gonna cut the tag end not terribly short again. I really doubt a fish is gonna cinch that more than that, but I got that little tag in there just in case. So now the last thing to do is my breakaway lead line. I do really like these. So these are no rolls, they're flat on the sides and they have this little brass eyelet in it. They can get fairly expensive, you can find them fairly cheap. This specific one is an 8 ounce. So 8 ounce works great for any big bluegill or small-ish carp. I mean, I'll put a 1 pound carp on with 8 ounces, but if you're going bigger than, you know, a bait like this big or so, you're gonna probably want 10 ounces, even 12 ounces, just so that bait can't move your whole rig. Got one hook on this side, the other hook facing that side. This is probably a good 1.5 pound carp, and I have 10 ounces of lead right now to secure him. This lead line needs to be lighter than your main line and your leader line. I'm using 150 pound test leader line and 120 pound test main line with braid. So I got a pretty big area that I can be lighter pound test on. So this is 40 pound test, which is heavy, I know, but you get less break-offs with it. One thing I have been using that definitely is not, you know, necessary is a swivel for the lead line. So again, this rig can and will get tangled, and I like to negate that as much as I can. So I have this really big, ginormous swivel, like a snap swivel essentially is what it is, and I can run the eyelet through it, you know, pinch it down, and this still acts as a swivel because it doesn't really matter what knot you use for your breakaway. I do either clench or Palomar usually. You want to lose the lead, not the fish. That is the main thing, because if you have it's a big complicated rig. When you have a fish on, this lead is going to be dragging through rocks and stuff as a fish is pulling it, and you want this to break. I have like roughly a 6-foot wingspan, so I'm going to do about 6 feet. That way I can kind of cut it down to what I need it to, and then either do a clench knot or a Palomar. Again, you can't really do a Palomar backwards like this. So what some people do, like my friend Jake, he doesn't know how to do a clench knot. He only knows Palomar. So he does Palomar on all 3 of these points and does the hook first, I think, then the lead, and then the main line. And if you do it in that order, you can do a Palomar on every single one of these eyelets. But I do it out of order all the time. So I'm going to do a clench knot here. Feel free to use whatever your preferred knot is. And that is it. That is the completed rig. And I will try to actually move from my seat for once and show you what this rig looks like. I'll attempt to actually show you the real deal here. So I got my bobber stop way up here. Got the bead, got the bobber itself. I got my little, you know, knot saver rubber pad there. Tri-swivel to my hook leader, and then down to my lead. So I will hook bait. I got a couple decent little bluegill that I'll grab for you. So I'll go, you know, 3/4 of the way back and then come up at like a 45-degree angle like that, and make sure you get those scales off. Okay, that's super important. So you can see like the angle of that, and the reason for that is it's a lot harder for this hook to hook back in on itself. So that's what that looks like. I'm gonna go ahead and get him in the water just because he's been out for a little bit. So there's my rig now in the water, and I will do a light little pitch for you. All right, time to get in the water and show you what that looks like down there. Yeah, so that's my rig. Try it out. Let me know how you do. Let me know if you hate it, if you love it. I like it. It does get tangled every once in a while, but as long as you kind of maintain that, it's a very good rig. I love it. It's caught me lots and lots of fish. So I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.